Tulimeri from Stream of Consciousness, and I'm now honored to interview Mr. Frank from Frank Lloyd. How are you, Frank?
Yeah, doing really well. How you going? I'm down here in Turku, so it's still pretty warm.
Yes, it's not no snow anywhere.
No, and not anytime soon. I don't think. It's been a really slow start to the winter so far.
Yeah. You are from Australia. What brought you here to Finland?
Originally, I came here first time like about 10 years ago or so. I came here for studies, so I was studying at the university here, and then yeah, that kind of led into work opportunities, and then I started doing some other stuff here, and yeah, 10 years later, I'm still here. I've been liking. I've been in Turku the whole time, like southwest Finland the whole time, and yeah, one thing led to another, and I kind of just kept taking opportunities when they came. So it's been good.
Yeah, Turku is a cool place. I visited there several times, and it's a really lovely place. So, you have just released a new album called Modern Day Folk. Can you please tell something about it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's something we've been working on for quite a long time. I mean, I've been writing songs for a long time and sort of slowly started recording some demos here and there, and then I went to just record a few demos by myself, just with the voice and the guitar at Valton Studios here in Turku, and maybe 3 or 4 years ago, even maybe 5 years ago, and then Timo, the engineer and producer there, he kind of encouraged me to record some more stuff and to maybe think about doing an album, and then so I wrote more songs and then started playing with Benjamin, who's the lead guitarist you can hear on the album, Benjamin Hakala. We started playing together and working on a lot of the songs, and we went to the studio and recorded some tracks, and the first couple that came up sounded good, so we decided to record some more until we had about 15 or so. I think we had 15 in the end, and then we kind of reduced that down until we had the final 11 that you hear on the album. But yeah, it's been good. I mean, this is the first album that I've done, and it was quite a learning process. I think I learned a lot about how recording music works, how production works, how to go about thinking about what songs even work well on an album. I mean, some of my favorite songs don't always get to go on the album because they just don't really fit with the other stuff which is on there, and they might be very similar to some of the other songs. So it was really a good chance to learn how putting an album together should work.
Yes, I listened it from Spotify. It sounded really nice and lovely music. Your artist name is Frank Lloyd. Where does this name comes from?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. Hey, it's because I mean my actual name, my given name is Stephen. That's what a lot of people know me as. But I use Frank Lloyd for the music. I mean, one of the reasons is because Stephen Phillips, which is my given name, is very common, and Phillips is one of the most common English-speaking names there is in the English language, and Stephen is also very common. So I thought I needed something which was a bit easier to find when people were searching for music online, and I wanted to think of a name that meant something rather than just inventing a name that sounded nice. I wanted something which had a connection to me and to who I was, and so Frank is the name of my mother's father, my grandfather, and Lloyd is the name of my father's father, my other grandfather, and then Lloyd is also my middle name. So my full name is actually Stephen Lloyd Phillips. And so I thought by taking the Frank from my maternal grandfather, it was a nice, I see it kind of as a reference and a tribute to them, because they were both people who were always very encouraging of me. And I should also mention they're both my grandmothers at the same time, both called Joan, who were also so supportive and encouraging in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, so I chose the Frank Lloyd name as a reference to them.
Yeah. What does the lyric tell of mostly?
The lyrics of the songs, I mean, most of the lyrics, I would say, in just about everything that I write, usually it's referring to some kind of personal experience that I've had, or to a story that I've sort of gone through or experienced or seen someone else experience sometimes. Something which I want to be able to, I guess, to put to music and to relate so that other people can hear it. And I try and, I mean, I spend a lot of time on the lyrics when I write songs. A huge amount of time is spent sort of drafting and redrafting lyrics, because the words to me are important, because they are I guess in that style of music, that sort of storytelling folk music, the lyrics are very central to the whole thing. And so while many of them are personal, some of them are not so personal, but whether they're personal or not, they're focused on telling a story, and that's what the lyrics mean to me.
Yeah, lyrics are very important to me also. I love writing lyrics. What is your favorite song from your own songs, and what does it tell about?
I mean, having said how much I think writing lyrics is important, I have to admit my favorite song off the album, at least, is one where the lyrics were actually adapted from a poem that my own dad wrote. My grandfather died 6 years ago now, I think. Yeah, 2014, about 6 years, a bit over 6 years ago now. And when he died, they had the funeral and everything, and I couldn't get to the funeral. I was living in Finland, and usually in Australia, funerals are quite fast. I mean, it's a very quick turnaround. You'll have the death, and within a week or so, you'll have the funeral. It's not like Finland, where the funeral's often quite some time after the death. So I wasn't able to get back to Australia in time for the funeral, and so my dad sent me through the sheet from the funeral service, where it had the different hymns that they sang and the different prayers that were said, and different people in the family had written things about my grandfather to sort of express their gratitude for his life and that sort of thing. And my dad had written this beautiful poem about his own relationship with his father. And as I was reading through it, like automatically in my head, these lyrics, or it was poetry, like a poem that my dad had written. It started to, speak to me in my head in some kind of, like in a melody, and I could automatically hear the melody, and I found the guitar and I started fiddling with the chords, and I started to slowly set his poem to the chords that were coming, and then I had to change a few words, and I added some bits and pieces to make it fit within a song structure, because it was written originally as a poem. And that's the song. It's called Our Father Dad. It's on, I think it's track 7, I want to say, on the album, 7 or 8. It's 7. Yeah, track 7 on the album. Is that one, Our Father Dad? And so I really like that one because it's something which involved something which was important to someone else in my family, and then also something I was able to contribute through adapting lyrics. And also I think that Benjamin does a beautiful guitar solo on that track. That was one of the ones in the studio when we went together. His guitar solo really just, it flows perfectly for me with the lyric and with the feeling and the meaning that the song is trying to express. So I would say that one is my favorite of the ones that are out there at the moment. I guess my favorite one is always the one that I'm working on right now, because that's the one that's most in my head. But of the ones that are completed and out there, then that's Our Father Dad would be it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who are the idols that you admire?
In music, I mean, there's a lot of wonderful songwriters, I think, that have come and gone over the years. Some of the ones that have had the most influence on me, there's a guy called Warren Zevon, who he passed away in the early 2000s, I think. He's an American guy, a beautiful songwriter. He had this incredible way, I feel, of using words as images, and then maybe managing to weave them beautifully into songs. And also, for a very poetic singer-songwriter, he was also very, very confident with a larger band. So some of his arrangements are amazing, like the drum entries on his stuff. I think is amazing. He brings percussion into his stuff. So he's got these incredible lyrics, which are incredibly witty and poetic and sarcastic and just wonderful in many ways. But then his musical arrangements, I think, are also outstanding. So he's one that I really like. There's another guy, Phil Oakes. He also died quite a long time ago now. But he was very big in the 60s. He was one of the early sort of protest singers who came along in that folk protest movement. I think he called himself a topical songwriter. He didn't like to be called a protest writer, but anyway. Yeah, he wrote a lot of really great stuff in the 60s and into the early 70s. He was sort of in that kind of that Bob Dylan-ish movement, but I guess far more political, and also a different type of songwriter. I think he was very much about getting very strong, clear message with his lyrics. So if you compare his songwriting to Dylan, I think it's always very easy to know what Phil Oakes is talking about in his lyrics. He's got that clarity. Whereas with Bob Dylan, he could be much more loosely poetic, I think. So often you have to dig a bit deeper for meaning into Dylan stuff, whereas Oakes had that real clear way of expressing himself. So I admire that in songwriting, and I guess I incorporate that a lot into what I do. And then I guess the last one that would come to my mind is there's an Australian singer-songwriter called John Williamson. He's more of like a country singer, I guess you'd call him. Australian country, like Australian folk country, and he writes beautiful stories about the land where he lives, the relationships with the people on the land, and also relationships within his own life between people. And he tells stories from around the country, and he's been writing songs for decades. I remember as a kid in the 80s or maybe early 90s going to see one of his concerts in my hometown where I grew up and thinking he was pretty amazing, and I've listened to his stuff ever since. And yeah, I guess those three guys would be my top three if I had to pick, of really big influences on my music and how I write and the things that I try and emulate from them, I guess.
What is your goal as a musician?
Yeah, it's tough. My goal as a musician, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever had really strong identified goals. I guess the thing that I enjoy most about music is it's something which is quite personal, but also quite public at the same time. And it took me a long time to feel confident enough, to be brave enough to share the music that I was writing online. I mean, I think maybe 8 or 10 years ago I started, maybe less, maybe 5 or 6 years ago I first started to put some demos online onto like SoundCloud, this sort of thing. And even that was a massive jump, because music for me for a long time had always been something very personal, which I did for myself as a reflection really, and as a way to think about things that were happening in life, and I guess try and get them out and sort of explain them to myself a little bit maybe. But then, yeah, in the last 5 or 6 years, music has also become something quite public for me, where I've put the songs out there and, done gigs and sung my own songs in front of people, and it's quite terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can relate. And
yeah, it is.
And yeah, so I guess the goal is to keep doing that. I mean, to keep challenging myself and to keep writing stuff which is important to me, and then to keep having the courage and the conviction to put it out there and to record more and to play more gigs, and to keep challenging myself, especially through it, because it is a challenge. I mean, it's not so easy to go and sit in front of a bunch of people that play stuff that you wrote about your own life. It's easier to put it just on the internet and just it floats off in the distance, But if there's people sitting in front of you, they're very real, and to keep putting myself and making myself feel uncomfortable, I think that gets better out of myself. Like I improve as a musician and artist when I put myself out there like that and take on the challenge of doing it publicly in front of people. So I guess that's the goal, is to continue to force myself to do that and push myself.
Yeah, that sounds good. You also make good work with other musicians and help them to write better lyrics. Yeah,
I've been there for a while. I mean, for several years at least, on and off. Because I'm living in Finland, and so I know various people who are making music here, and often they're writing in English because the lyrics are in English. Then it's not so easy always to write in a first language, and then to write in a second or a third or a fourth language is even more difficult. So I've been working with various people that have been writing song lyrics that are not in their first language, to try and help with making the songs a bit tighter, either whether it's by ways of choosing words or just making sure that the language is clean and correct, and not full of lots of little like accidental mistakes, for example, which can make it harder for a person listening if the English isn't clean. And then if there's an idea which is being expressed, to try and find ways to express it in a more obvious way that might not be so, because often if you're writing in your own language in your head, you might directly translate into English and it doesn't quite work, like the metaphor doesn't quite work in another language. So trying to help songwriters find ways to work with that and write lyrics in English which are more what they want to express through the songs, and yeah, keeping it always based on what they want to express and finding ways to express it.
Yeah. What do you think about streaming business? I mean, the Spotify and these other systems.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what generation I'm talking to a bit too, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and this didn't exist. When I was a teenager and a young person first discovering music, there was no such thing. So I think about it in terms of positives and negatives in a way. So one positive, if I think of positives first, is that when I was a teenager in the 90s, if I wanted to listen to music, then I needed to go and spend, $20 or $30, like that's Australian dollars. It's like 20, let's say 20 euros ish. I don't know what an album cost in Finland in the 90s, but it was about 20 euros in Australia for an album. That's a lot of money for a teenager. Realistically, I could probably afford to get 5 or 10 albums per year. And that meant that I could listen to what I had plus what my brother had. Luckily, my dad had a very large music collection. And I was very lucky that I grew up with a father who had a massive collection of stuff ranging from, way back up until the present day. So I listened to a lot of his music, and my grandfather also listened to a lot of music and had stuff that I could listen to. But so in that sense, it makes a lot more music accessible for a lot more people. So that's a positive. Whereas now, I can pay 10 euros a month. I can listen to anything, almost. Just about everything you can think of on Spotify or whichever one. But then a negative, I think, is that for artists and for musicians, like people who are trying to make even a small living out of recording, it's very, very difficult now, because I did some quick sums earlier today after we've been talking. And I calculated that roughly, if I'm getting more or less half a cent per stream off Spotify or iTunes or Google Music or whichever one people are listening on, if I'm getting half a cent per stream, that means to make 10 euros money, I need to get 2,000 streams, which for a small independent artist is a lot already. 2,000 streams are already, you're doing pretty well. If 2,000 people are playing your songs, that's pretty good. That's to make 10 euros through Spotify. If I put it differently, if I go to a gig, like we made a bunch of CDs after I recorded the album with Dimo and Benji and Benjamin, and we printed off a bunch of CDs, and they cost, to get nice plastic box, good artwork, everything. We made up the CDs. They cost, for a run of 300, costs about 2 euros per CD, give or take. I can sell out at a gig for maybe 10 or 12 euros if people buy that at a gig. So that means for the same money that I make from selling one CD to a person at a gig, often who doesn't even have a CD player, it's just because they want to support the music more than anything else, because a lot of people don't have CD players anymore. I have 2,000 streams for that. So from an artist's perspective, an independent artist's perspective, it's a really, really tough environment to be operating in. You get more exposure.
I agree with you. Yeah. It's really tough.
Yeah, it's really hard. And okay, you can argue that yes, it means that more people can listen to the music than ever before, but that's okay for a person who is not looking to do that for a living. It doesn't even cover the costs. If you look at the cost of recording an album, it's not cheap. You're looking thousands of euros for studio time and musicians and artwork and all that sort of stuff, and distribution fees. All of that adds up, and then all of that costs for that. There is no way that I'm ever going to recover the cost of recording an album through Spotify streaming. It's not going to happen. So everyone that isn't quite high up the tree has to operate at a loss if they rely only on streaming revenue. You have to look at other ways to make money, playing gigs, selling merchandise. Yeah. And at the moment, we can't really play gigs because everything's shut down. So the gig option for money is quite restricted right now. So it's certainly it's not a great time for independent music.
Yes, it's really sad situation right now.
Yeah.
You have obviously done some gigs as a troubadour, but are you planning to widen your repertoire as a band performer?
Yeah, we've been talking about this actually with a couple of friends to try and experiment a bit with some projects. First of all, I guess the next album, which is sort of in early progress, at least the songs have been written, or half of the songs roughly, I'd say, have been written. So the idea is because on the first album, on Modern Day Folk, it was just guitars, so we recorded most of the tracks is a vocal track, which was recorded studio live with 2 guitars, and then we put a 3rd guitar over the top for the solos, and that's how most of those tracks were done. So the idea for the second album would be to bring in some bass and some percussion, maybe even some other strings. We're not sure, it depends on how the songs turn out sounding. So then the idea would be, once we have an album of songs which are all written and recorded and released with various instruments to then in the live performances bring those instruments in, and like a small stepping stone. I think in the next gigs, once we can play gigs live again, the aim is to have at least either a bass or a drum, some sort of percussion in those live performances if possible. Would be nice, I think, because it'll give a different sound, like a more full kind of sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you traveled anywhere else in Finland than in Turku?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've lived the whole 10 years or so, a little bit over 10 years. I've lived here in Turku, in the southwest of Finland. For those outside of Finland, it's what I think the 5th or 6th largest city in Finland now, something like, if you include Espoo, Vantaa as separate cities. So Turku is about 200 and something thousand people in the southwest of Finland. So I've been living here. I've been quite lucky. I've travelled quite a lot. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Helsinki and also in Tampere, because they're the two closest main cities to here.
Yeah.
Various places in between. I was really lucky at Juhannus, which is the midsummer celebration this year. I was in Kemia in Swedish. It's a big island in between Turku and Helsinki. I spent some time there. It was really lovely. And then in the east, I've been as far as Lappeenranta, but only for one day for an Australian football tournament, and then back. So I didn't see much of the east. And then going up, I mean, I've been in Vaasa quite a bit. I was in Pori, Rauma, going up the coast that way. Then Oulu one time, I went up there. And then in Lapland, I've been a couple of times. I was in, Kuusamo is not quite Lapland, I guess. It's just below.
It's not exactly there, but it's almost there.
Yeah, close there. So I was in Kuusamo one time, one Easter, which was really beautiful, like around that area. And then up a bit further north, I was in Enontekiö, which is near Muonio, like way up northwest Finland.
You have traveled more than I have done.
Yeah, one winter. And Bello, I shouldn't forget Bello, my friend. My friend would be furious if I left Bello out of the short list of Finnish places to visit. That's also Lapland. I was there one midsummer, which was beautiful. It was, and some other places. Nothing. I like to travel. It's one of the things that keeps me sane.
You have also made some songwriting lessons on the internet. Can you tell about that?
Yeah. So originally, I mean, it's online at the moment because of the COVID problems. It's easier to do stuff through Zoom and through Teams and stuff virtually, because face to face can be tricky. But yeah, for the last probably 3 or 4 years, I would say, maybe a bit longer, maybe 3 or 4 years. I've been involved with this. It's a company which is an experience sharing company called Doers, which is set up in Turku, and they've now expanded around Finland and also parts of other Europe. And they had this platform where and a good friend of mine is the guy who started it, which is why I was aware of it to begin with. And they have this platform where they have different experiences. So if you go to a different town or whatever, you can think, okay, what you might like to do, and different people take people on like tourist trips, so they teach them different local cultural things or food or whatever. And I was thinking, what's something which might be interesting for people on that platform, which they wouldn't get to do much. And so I put like a learn how to write a song experience on there. And I was quite surprised with the response to it. Quite many people over the last 3 or 4 years have come. So the idea is that we get together and I teach them, some songwriting techniques. It depends where they're up to. If they've never done anything before, then we start from, what sort of chords might sound nice together. Sometimes it's been people who are quite advanced with their songwriting and they really just need a bit of help, tightening things up, or like, how do we add a bridge, or is this in the right key for my voice? And then we come together and put a song together. And then if they want to, the other thing we can also do after that is, if they're happy with the song that we write together, then we can also make a time to go to the studio and record it properly in a studio, so they can experience the feeling of, recording in a proper recording studio. So that's like an additional add-on, and it's been good. The response has been really good, and we've done some really interesting stuff out of it. And yeah, all the people have given really nice feedback, which is quite humbling. It's nice to know that you can sort of share something that I enjoy doing with people who can get an experience they wouldn't otherwise have. Yeah, it's been good. I've been liking it, and they've got a couple coming up before the end of the year. We can do a couple of people in Turku because the travel's not such a problem here, but yeah, it's been a nice extra thing to do. It's a nice way to take songwriting away from just myself and do it with other people.
have you planned to make some internet gigs?
Yeah, we sort of started when the all the COVID stuff began in March, April. We sort of started to think, what are we going to do with this? Because we just finished the album and it got released in March, which was terrible timing because the plan had been to release the album in March and then do a bunch of gigs through the spring and the summer to promote the album. Well, we managed to do one live gig, which was nice, and it was good. Like it was a nice night, and people came along, which was good. But that was it. So yeah, I've been a bit slow on some of it with in terms of doing like a full live stream gig. I haven't got to that. I've recorded a few sort of mini gigs, which I've put on YouTube in small bits and pieces and released song by song. And yeah, I mean, I'm still remaining hopeful that by early next year we might have a bit more freedom with being able to play in live venues again. Luckily in Finland, the impact hasn't been as bad as many other countries in Europe. I'm optimistic that we might get some options to play live soon or sooner rather than later. But if it's looking like it's not going to happen, then yeah, I think we'll have to start looking much more into live gigs. I've done a couple of ones which just been like private gigs, like just like to a smaller event venue, and it's a kind of a funny feeling sitting there playing to the computer, and then there's people through the camera on the other side.
Yeah,
it was a strange feel, but it's nice, and the people enjoyed it, I think, so that was good. But yeah, I mean, that'll be the next step. If stuff doesn't improve with the live venues, then I will have to, I think, look more seriously into that.
Yeah. What would you like to ask yourself?
Ask myself.
Yes.
I guess I can sort of give a sort of an update on what's going on now. I guess like what's happening, the next steps. So yes, the album came out in March, which was great, and there's been a lot of positive response to that. Enough to think that it's worth doing another one, at least. And I've got a lot of songs already written and a lot that I'm working on. So at the moment, been going through writing songs, working on songs with some other people, with some other musicians, and then hopefully early next year, like within the first few months of next year, start to get back into the studio and lay down some tracks for the next album. I guess the focus will be the same. Like if you've been listening to the first album, it'll be a very similar style, but with a bit more instrumentation. So maybe a bit more bass here and there, some percussion, whether it's drums or other types of percussion, maybe some occasional strings, just a similar sound, but maybe a more full version of that same sound is what will be coming next, I think. And yeah, hopefully some more live music we can play, because it's the one thing that's in a way defines an artist in many ways is the live performances, and when those are gone, it's a different feeling to the music, because it all just remains inside, because you release an album onto the internet and then it's not as real as playing for people. So that's definitely missed, and something that they're hoping to get back to.
Yeah. What would you like to say to your fans?
I guess, look, everyone who's been supportive, and it's a lot of people over a long period of time, have been very supportive of the whole process of getting the album together and of the music itself. Like everyone who's bought the album, who's played it online, who's come to gigs and enjoyed the music, because I guess it's something really, really nice to be able to write music and then have other people respond to it, because it becomes a two-way process rather than just a one-way thing of me, writing songs myself and recording demos and stuff, and to get that two-way element to the music has been really important, and it's something I really appreciate, I feel really lucky for. So yeah, so just thank you, and for all the support on stuff like social media, people who are following there. It's just really great to have so many people along for the ride.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Frank Lloyd, about this interview, and I hope you have a fantastic future in the music business, and I'd have finally can do some gigs after this virus goes away. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.